hope you are staying well. If you are under 18, I do not advise you to watch this video. The story is true and happened in reality just a few years ago. The narrator Robert says, "In the final years of my studies at Harvard University in Boston, I had to rent a shared house with a guy named Robert from Philadelphia. In the first week, he seemed very quiet and not good at communicating with others. Later on, it turned out that he was sad and depressed, and I didn't know the reason for that at the time. After about 2 months, I asked him about his condition. He told me it's a sad and strange story that makes him feel a mix of fear, regret, and intense guilt. I left my friend Thomas to die in a terrifying way, and I didn't do anything because I just trusted the doctors who were supervising his treatment. Then he opened his phone and told me, 'Read here, these are Thomas's last messages.' I started reading and felt shocked, but I had to return his phone to him and console him a little. By the end of that night, he seemed somewhat relieved after our long conversation, and he promised to tell me the whole story and its details soon. Days passed, and he became more open to communicating with me. One day, it was a holiday and we didn't go out because of the rain. We were exchanging bits of conversation, and I deliberately directed the conversation towards the story of his friend Thomas, hoping he would tell me about it. And indeed, he reopened Thomas's story and said he would tell me what happened in detail, maybe feeling a little relieved. Thomas was my curious and adventurous intellectual friend. He called me once and told me he was in the hospital and wanted to see me, so I hurried to him. He was very pale and exhausted. I sat next to him, and he said, 'Dear Robert, you know I was sick recently. I was transferred to the hospital, and today became necessary for me to tell someone the truth about my illness. The situation is deteriorating constantly and very quickly. I trust you completely and hope you keep this secret and hide it from my parents, especially given my current condition.' He said that while browsing the internet aimlessly, he came across an intriguing title and started searching for it. He found a lot of conflicting information about it, but all agreed that it was a book of black magic, the most evil, and sorcery, the most evil in the world. Tom continued his search with interest, always eager to explore the subject further. He eventually came across individuals who claimed to have copies of it, although incomplete. After some hesitation and deliberation, he decided to purchase it and discover its contents for himself. He contacted a person named Ali, an Iranian national, who claimed to possess a copy of the book. They agreed on a price, and Ali provided Tom with an address in his city for delivery. Tom agreed and noted the address, which was in a distant neighborhood on the other side of the city. The delivery was scheduled for 10 p.m., and with both excitement and apprehension, Tom went to collect the parcel. In a small shop in a remote neighborhood, Tom found an elderly man sitting alone. Upon entering, the shopkeeper remarked, "You must be Thomas." Tom confirmed, and the shopkeeper handed him a bag, saying, "Thomas, you won't be able to finish it, but you can destroy it before opening. This is the Book of Knowledge, originating from the ancient kingdom of Babylon," the shopkeeper explained. "There are only a limited number of copies in the world because it is hand-copied by sorcerers and cannot be printed." He reiterated, "You can destroy it before opening because once you open it, you won't be able to close it without completing it." Tom hastily replied, "Yes, yes," and left. Upon reaching home, Tom hid the book in his room. As soon as he arrived, he slept, planning for the next day. If this is your first visit to the channel, we would be delighted if you subscribed and liked the video so we can continue together. We also welcome your feedback on the story in the comments and any suggestions for similar stories. The following day, eagerly returning from work, Tom entered his room, retrieved the book, and opened the packaging. Inside lay an old, tattered book with brown pages, handwritten, just as he had read before. He began reading the preparations for the first spell, but found that it required tools he didn't have. The next day, Tom gathered the necessary supplies and lit the candles and incense. He turned off the lights, drew the listed symbols, repeated the incantation, and waited for the signal. It was midnight. Everything seemed normal, and he didn't notice any difference. He guessed it had failed and decided to sip a cup of coffee in the candlelight and incense aroma, regretting the money he wasted on this silly experiment and how he trusted a sorcerer. He prepared his coffee, returned to his room, and suddenly, the candles went out without any reason. Although he found it strange, he didn't dwell on it. He lit the lamps, drank his coffee, and slept that night as he thought was normal. In the following days, while at work, he constantly thought about that experiment. There must have been some mistake in the execution. He decided to try the second spell. It required more supplies, especially as it was a stronger spell compared to the first. In the evening, he gathered most of the supplies but still needed to find a black cat to sacrifice and a chicken liver. He lay down, contemplating where he could find a black cat and, more importantly, how he could bring himself to slaughter an innocent animal. After careful consideration, he decided to cancel the experiment and get rid of the book in the morning. Meanwhile, he felt a movement outside the window. He opened the curtains and saw a black cat staring at him from the windowsill. He felt as if it came to fulfill what he read in the book. It was an opportunity that must be seized, and he felt an inexplicable rush in daring to slaughter the cat. The next day, while at work, he prepared to execute the spell if the cat came again in the evening. Indeed, in the evening, the cat was on the windowsill again. He opened the window, and the cat entered quietly. He waited until midnight and then performed the spell meticulously. He lit the incense and candles, slaughtered the cat, and used its blood to draw the symbols and spells on the bathroom floor, mixing some of its blood with the cat's. He then poured the mixed blood on his head and the rest of his body. He sat for the second time, waiting for the signal for hours, but nothing happened. He just started feeling nauseous, on the verge of vomiting from the smell of blood and water on his body. He promptly cleaned up the area, showered, and disposed of the remnants in the garbage along with the book, having torn it apart, then went to bed feeling angry and disgusted with himself. He lay down, still feeling tired and nauseous. After a few minutes, he began to feel a chill creeping into his body for no apparent reason. Suddenly, his hair stood on end, and tears welled up in his eyes, and he couldn't find comfort until morning. The next morning, he went to work as usual, but he appeared tired and distracted. He looked at his colleagues, but they seemed different, as if they were watching him. The day passed with difficulty. In the following few days, things took a strange turn for him until he felt that the objects he used, like pens, tables, water taps, appeared to be creatures with souls that looked at him and whispered to him. At the same time, strange occurrences began to happen in the house. One day, as he returned from work, he found his little sister sitting on the street in front of the house, on the ground, looking very dirty. When he shouted at her, she ran into the house. He followed her, shouting and calling out to her. His father asked him about the reason for his loud shouts. He told him about it. His father was surprised by his condition and told him that his sister had been sleeping for a long time. When he entered her room, he found her deeply asleep. And he found something even more astonishing. She was wearing clothes different from what he saw her wearing on the street. At that moment, he realized that he had dragged himself and his family into trouble with his foolish madness. He went to his bed, surrendering to physical and mental exhaustion, and lay down. The chill crept back to him, and he began to feel as if many eyes were watching him in the room. Similarly, for the first time, he began to sense an imagination hovering close to him. He started to hear his heartbeat in his ears and the flow of his blood. He looked around, puzzled, unable to find anything certain. It didn't take many days in this state until he began to hear deep, non-human voices, but he couldn't discern whether they were from inside his skull or from around him. One night, in the quiet of the night, he woke up unable to open his eyes. There was something heavy pressing on his chest, almost suffocating him. He tried to get rid of it, pushing it away, but it was intangible. He struggled and writhed, but to no avail. He was on the verge of suffocation until he sat up abruptly, his voice erupting as loudly as possible. His parents rushed to him, turning on the lights and trying to calm him down, astonished. He told them what had happened to him, but he didn't tell them about the story of the book. His father said it might have been a nightmare, and stayed with him until morning. That day, he couldn't bring himself to go to work. Strange events continued to unfold in the house, from objects going missing and turning up in unexpected places to dishes falling off kitchen shelves and breaking, doors and windows opening on their own after being confirmed closed. Everyone in the house realized that something strange was happening. Things became more complicated, but the worst was yet to come. Thomas started seeing ugly creatures emerging from the walls, and he constantly heard whispers and noises that seemed to almost burst his head. At night, whenever he turned in any direction, he would suddenly catch a glimpse of a face staring at him and then disappearing quickly. Later, he couldn't look at mirrors at all because he would see not only his own face but many terrifying faces, and he couldn't look into shadowy or cramped corners or under beds and seats because they would sprout faces for him in all those places. One night, something unexpected happened. The black cat that he had previously slaughtered approached him and transformed into a repulsive-looking woman. She came closer to him, emitting an unpleasant smell, and spoke to him words he couldn't hear or understand. He tried to scream and escape, but he couldn't make a sound or move, and he fainted. This situation repeated itself many times until his health deteriorated due to lack of sleep, food, and exhaustion. His father summoned the doctor, who decided to transfer him to the hospital. In the hospital, things didn't improve. The doctors, after examining him, suspected he had meningitis and considered what he saw and heard as auditory and visual hallucinations due to the illness, so they placed him in the intermediate care unit. Despite tests and examinations not confirming any inflammation. On his first night in the hospital, the same repulsive woman approached him again. He tried to remain still and calm despite his fear and agitation, perhaps aided by the sedatives given to him by the doctors. She whispered in his ear with a trembling, cold voice, asking him to dismiss her as he had summoned her before he died. Before she could show him something in her hand, the nurse hurriedly entered and asked him if he was asleep or feeling something because the heart and respiratory monitor had issued an alarm. He told her he had just had a scary dream. The nurse reassured him and left. The next day, Thomas thought he had to tell someone the truth, but not his father or mother. He decided to call me to go visit him and tell me the truth so that I could find someone to help him get rid of her. Indeed, I went to him and was stunned by what I heard. I couldn't believe it. Before I left, he said to me, "Dear Robert, please believe that I am not sick and that what I have told you is the truth, not delusions." I promised him that I would do my best to help him, but deep down, I believed he was delusional because of the illness. As I left, I went to the doctor in charge of him and told him a bit about the interpretation of what he sees and hears. He assured me that they were just auditory and visual hallucinations due to the disorder of his nervous system because of the illness. I had to trust the doctor's words because Thomas's story, despite its accuracy and coherence, was hard to believe. After several days, I went to visit him again after he called and asked me to come quickly. When I arrived, it was clear that his condition had deteriorated significantly. There were scratch marks on his neck. He showed them to me and said she had tried to strangle him. He continued, stating that on the previous night, that same woman came to him as she always did, but this time she appeared very angry. She demanded that he dismiss her. She showed him a sheet containing symbols and talismans that caused his ordeal. On it were the symbols he had drawn on the bathroom floor, underneath which were the incantations he had recited the day he summoned her. But he looked at her bewildered, unable to figure out how to use it to rid himself of this affliction, especially since he had destroyed the book and gotten rid of it. She insisted that he dismiss her and began to grow angrier and more repulsive. She sat on his chest and reached her cold hands to his neck, attempting to strangle him until he lost consciousness, and the nurse rushed in after the heart and respiratory monitors sounded an alarm. She found him in a coma. She worked to revive him and informed him that he needed to be transferred to the intensive care unit because it seemed that he had hit himself during the coma and caused scratches on his neck. He asked me to visit him because he might not be able to do so in the intensive care unit where communication devices are prohibited. When I sat with him, he said to me, "I know it's not easy to help with these illogical matters, but, Robert, promise me you'll believe my story and that I'm not sick as everyone thinks. I don't want anything else from you. After a while, I'll be transferred to the intensive care unit, and we probably won't meet again. Please let me finish, it won't be long. I have this night or the next, and it will be over. I hope I won't suffer much. I know it's impossible for me to dismiss her now. How foolish I was, Robert, to bring troubles upon myself and my family. How ashamed I am of myself and guilty towards them. My dear Robert, there's no need to tell my family the truth, let them think it's meningitis. But tell them I apologize for everything and that I love them all and wish to meet them in the afterlife. We'll be happier and at peace." I followed him after he was transferred to the intensive care unit and looked at him through the glass to bid him farewell. He pointed to the scratches on his neck and waved his hand to me. I left, feeling very sad about the state the illness had brought him to, and I thought he was delusional. The next day, I went to check on him, but I didn't find his supervising doctor in his room, so I went to the intensive care unit to check on him, but he wasn't there. I asked one of the nurses in the unit, and she told me with regret that he had passed away. Unfortunately, he died at 3 in the morning from an unexpected respiratory crisis, indicated by the signs and scratches that appeared on his neck again. Thomas collapsed before me in tears, saying, "I left him to die in terror, and I didn't do anything for him because I chose to trust the doctor's words and didn't believe him. I hope he forgives me." After several years, Robert still lives those strange events daily in his memory, searching for details of similar stories and the science beyond logic and parallel universes and higher dimensions. And I ask you not to forget to subscribe to the channel, like, and comment before you sleep, so that the black cat doesn't visit you. You probably won't be happy with its visit. Thank you very much.